Welcome to the Holistic Plastic Surgery Show, where we dive deep into the hottest trends in health, beauty, and cosmetic treatments. I'm Dr. Anthony Youn, America's holistic plastic surgeon. Aging is a lifelong process. I tell my patients, it's a blessing to get older because the alternative isn't what any of us want. However, if you'd like to fight it every step of the way, let's do it and let's have fun with it. Well, what you need to do to fight off aging changes as you get older. What you should do at 30 is drastically different than what you should do at 50. So today I'm joined by one of the country's leaders in cosmetic plastic surgery to discuss what a life plan for looking your best should look like. We'll discuss what to do each decade to turn back the clock and fight Father Time. We'll also discuss which society your cosmetic plastic surgeon must be a member of. So let's get started. My guest this week is a board-certified plastic surgeon in private practice in Honolulu, Hawaii. He's chief of plastic surgery at Honolulu Shriners Hospital and an assistant clinical professor of surgery at the University of Hawaii School of Medicine. He specializes in cosmetic and reconstructive surgery of all kinds, including facial rejuvenation, breast enhancement, and body contouring. He also performs volunteer burn reconstruction, hand surgery, and treatment of congenital deformities at Honolulu Shriners Hospital. He's won dozens of awards for being a top plastic surgeon both locally and nationally. He's a member of the American Society of Plastic Surgeons, a fellow of the American College of Surgeons, and was recently elected the president of the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. I'd like to welcome my good friend, board-certified plastic surgeon, Dr. Clyde Ishii, to the Holistic Plastic Surgery Show. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Dr. Ishii. I really appreciate you taking the time, especially all the way out in Hawaii.
Well, I'm very honored to be on the show, Tony. This is something that is very interesting. This is the first time for me to do it, but I'm glad that I have the opportunity because I think this is a great way of getting the message out to patients.
Well, it's definitely an honor to have you on, especially because you were just voted and you are the current president of the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. We shorten it to ASAPS, and ASAPS is a group that all plastic surgeons know about. Can you tell me what it means to you to be president of ASAPS?
Sure. First of all, it's a great honor to serve this organization. You know, the organization is well known across the world as the leading organization that is comprised solely of board-certified plastic surgeons who dedicate a substantial portion of their time to aesthetic surgery and cosmetic medicine. So, you know, it's a great honor, but I also realize it's a high responsibility, and I want to serve our members very well.
So let's just kind of instruct the people who are listening and watching today about the importance of ASAPS. So as a patient, why is it important for patients to know about ASAPS and choose an ASAPS member surgeon?
Well, if a patient is contemplating or looking at possibly having cosmetic surgery, you want to go to a qualified surgeon because you're more likely to get the best result in the safest manner. And the ASAPS, or the Aesthetic Society, is comprised solely of board-certified surgeons. So these are surgeons who have, you know, gone through multiple tests and multiple peer reviews to get to that point. And so these surgeons also concentrate a large portion of their practice on cosmetic surgery. Mm-hmm. So you're more likely to get someone who is very skilled and practices in a safe manner.
Yeah, and I guess when I think about ASAPS, you know, I've been in practice now for 14 years, and when I started practice, I was very fortunate in that I started really doing mostly all aesthetic surgery, cosmetic surgery, and becoming a member to me was really important because the way I looked at ASAPS was that any plastic surgeon who really wanted to focus specifically on cosmetic surgery, they want to be the best at their craft, they're all members of ASAPS. I mean, that's that group, and there are thousands of members, but you know that those people who make that group, who are members of the Aesthetic Society, have had to live up to quite high qualifications and even expectations as current members.
That is correct. I agree with you totally, because basically people join ASAPS because they want to be part of a group that has very high standards. And so we get the best, in my opinion, we get the best education. We're exposed to the latest and greatest techniques, but we also know how to practice in a safe manner.
Yeah, so all ASAP's plastic surgeons are all board certified plastic surgeons. They're all certified by the American Board of Plastic Surgery. They have passed the rigorous examinations for board certification and maintenance of certification as well. In addition, they are vetted, and there's also ethical things that the society does to watch out for plastic surgeons who may not be all that ethical. That's correct, right?
That is absolutely correct. Basically, what we want to make sure is the patients are treated in a fair manner. So if someone is practicing either what I call maybe a little bit unethical, a little sleazy, we don't want members to practice like that. So if we find a member doing that, then they are called on it, and they have to change their behavior or be expelled from the society. When we are looking at members who are applying for membership in ASAPs, we look at all these things, everything from their record in their community, as well as what they have on their websites, how they're advertising, and so forth and so on. They can be entrepreneurs, that's okay. They can be, a little bit out of the box, that's okay. But they have to be practicing in a way that's ethical, so
Exactly.
that yes, patients are treated fairly.
Yeah, so if you're listening or you're watching the podcast today and you're thinking about plastic surgery, I think that's a super important group for you to get to know, or to get to know an ASAP's plastic surgeon if you're going to consider it, because you know that they're the cream of the crop of plastic surgeons. So they're plastic surgeons. We do so much, and you and I have done our residency. It's been a long time, but we learned about cleft lips and palates. We did burn surgery. We did reconstructive surgery of all kinds. But ASAPs are those plastic surgeons who have done all of that, but now they're focusing primarily on aesthetic or cosmetic surgery. And that's why if you're thinking about plastic surgery, cosmetic plastic surgery, that's the type of doc you want to see. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. And one of the things I think that's unique about you is, and I thank you for taking the time this morning. I'm in Michigan, and he is in Hawaii, in a completely different time zone. Over here, it is like 11 a.m. here. What time is it over there, Dr. Ishii?
It's about 5:15 in the morning, but I'm an early riser.
What time do you usually get to the office?
I'm in the office by 4 o'clock because I adopted this practice mainly because I've been involved with the Aesthetic Society for many years, and I realized from early on that in order to communicate with my colleagues across the nation, I had to, kind of get up to their time zone.
Yeah.
It was not fair for me to jump on a call and, come into the office, let's say at 9 o'clock in the morning, and expect people on the East Coast to wait for me, because then that way the day's work doesn't get done. So this way, when I come in, I can make calls, answer emails. So in my opinion, at least the society can move forward and make progress.
So now, other than obviously the time zone difference, I have interviewed people on this podcast from New York, from Los Angeles, from Miami, from the Midwest. What is it like to practice plastic surgery in Hawaii? So what is your practice like, and what are the types of patients that you see and procedures that you do?
Well, first of all, living in Hawaii is great. I grew up here. All of my education was on the continental United States, and then I returned here to practice. Mm-hmm. So it's a great place to live, but obviously our work, our life's work in plastic surgery is very important. And we have, I think our practice here would not be very different from those on the continental U.S. We see a large mixture of patients. My patient mix is probably maybe 50-50 Asian and Caucasian patients. They have the same desires. I like to think that we are kind of somewhere in the middle. We're not California, but we're probably someplace in the middle, which I think is good. Sometimes many of my patients, they come in specifically, say they don't want to have that real plastic surgery look with the puffed out lips and things like this. And I think, so I like to think that Hawaii is a little bit, the patients, their sense of what is considered beautiful or nice is appropriate. And so, but otherwise, it's like another plastic surgery practice anywhere in the United States.
Do you get a lot of people who come out specifically to have plastic surgery out there so that they can kind of combine a vacation with the actual surgery?
On occasion we do, but it's not as popular or it's not as prevalent as you would think, mainly because there are many places that have very good plastic surgery these days. Probably in the early 80s, when, and maybe 90s, that we used to have a lot of traffic from Asia that come to Honolulu, want their plastic surgery. But now, as you know, this is plastic surgery is very global, so there are good places to have plastic surgery all over the world. If you seek it out, you can find it. So we have occasional patients who come here, and let's say I take care of a population of patients from, let's say, Japan. But most of those patients, they're not flying in just for plastic surgery. These are patients who are native from Japan, but they have vacation homes in Hawaii. And so for them, they come here, let's say, twice a year. And while they're here, they may come in for various procedures and then go back.
Well, let's talk a little bit about something that I think is kind of special about what you do in your practice. And for me, in my practice, I've been really going towards all these different other areas of overall health and well-being, and so kind of this holistic plastic surgery concept. One thing that you do, which I am really interested in hearing about, is you create this life plan for a lot of your patients, a life plan for kind of looking good for the rest of their lives. Can you explain what the concept is of this life plan and how you put that into motion with patients?
Sure. Whenever I see a patient, or I often see patients who come in and they are just, I call it, they're flitting around. In other words, they see an ad on TV, they go and grab that product, they talk to somebody, they run in, get a procedure done, but it's not a concerted, well thought out process. And that's the reason why you have patients who either have spent a lot of money with little results, or they've spent a lot of money and they have kind of unusual, weird results, and maybe they've burned bridges along the way. And so when I talk to patients, and if they're truly interested in looking their best, I tell them that if they trust me, what I'd like to be is their life coach. We have coaches in all different areas of things we do. For instance, like, I happen to be a golfer, so I have a golf coach, right? So I can't train myself, so I put it in the hands of somebody who is an expert, and they help me out. Well, people have life coaches for diet, whatever. So I tell the patients, if they're truly interested in looking their best, and when I say looking their best, looking natural, but at the top of their game, then what I'll be is their life coach. And they say, what is that about? And I tell them, well, for instance, I think that certain, I give them some ideas on what they should be doing at certain ages, and then maybe when you can start thinking about certain non-invasive procedures. And I tell them, okay, for instance, like if a patient comes in and they're, let's say, 40 years old and they want a facelift, I say, I think that's a little early. I don't think that you need it, because you're just starting to show the very early beginnings of facial aging. But maybe what we can do is I can teach you about how to take care of your skin, and then we can maybe bring in, if it really bothers you, we can bring in some non-invasive modalities. But you see how we kind of pace the patients along. I tell patients that the patients cannot be expected to know a lot about what's out there. As plastic surgeons, it's our job to find out what works, what doesn't work, what's safe, what's not, and then if the patient is trusts me and wants me to help them, then I will say, look, it's my job to tell you what works, what doesn't work, and what I think is going to make you look good in the long term. I tell them, it's not a surprise that if you ever notice that certain people, let's say in Hollywood, why is it that some of those Hollywood stars look great throughout the years, while others look look very what we call plastic surgerized.
Yep.
The so-called, oh God, I don't want to look like them. And why is it? To me, it stems from, yes, maybe some of them had better genetics, but a lot of it has to do with whoever was coaching them, and along the way, I think was on it. For instance, like I always point out to my patients that, like Sophia Loren. Okay, if you look at Sophia, obviously she had great genetics, high cheekbones, whatever. But I know for a fact that, and she's admitted that she's had plastic surgery, but it was done very well in a certain concerted manner, so that she didn't have that bizarre look at age 50 or 55. She just, to me, that person had her coach was a master, and was able to do it in a way that made her look beautiful well into her 80s.
Yeah,
yeah.
And I think that a lot of it is kind of, I guess the way I look at it, it's like anything in life. A little of something good can be very good, but a lot of it can make things go wrong. And so with plastic surgery, I do the same thing, I'm sure, as you do, where it's, I use it really as a last resort, and it can be a very effective last resort when there really is no other non-surgical option. It can work great, but it's unfortunately people who are doing these things where we say, for example, about 15 years ago, really people started talking about volumizing the face and using fat grafting, and the face ages in a three-dimensional fashion. It's not just tightening, but it's filling things out. And so I think it's such a great it's such a great idea, and it makes a lot of sense. And if you do it in a conservative fashion, you can really help people to look so much more naturally more youthful. But like anything in our field, some people say, oh, that's a great idea, let's take that to the extreme. Same thing with breast implants. Hey, let's give a woman back what they may have lost after having children. And then there's that whole idea, hey, let's make them massive in the chest. And facelifts the same thing. It's like, okay, a little bit of looseness actually is natural as you get older, but no, we're going to make that face as tight as possible. It's just kind of using it, I think, in a prudent fashion.
That's correct. I agree totally with that philosophy.
So just for some practical things for our listeners and our viewers today, you're a big fan of kind of giving this life plan for the patients, and a lot of it does involve non-surgical treatments. If we can just go through a couple of decades here so that people who are listening can say, hey, maybe that's something I can look into. Let's start with somebody who's in their 20s or 30s, because 20s or 30s, these patients typically, we're not looking at big surgeries or anything like that. Can you give a couple of maybe two suggestions for people who are in their 20s and 30s for them to look younger or retain their youth that you recommend in your practice?
Sure. First of all, a lot of it at that age, and you have to start them on the right track in terms of what we call lifestyle choices. So I caution them that obviously things, eating properly, being very sun safe. In Hawaii, we have a lot of sun, and so we have to, from a very early age, we teach the patients on being very, very sun safe. I tell my patients they should have 2 sunscreens. One of them would be for just daily use, where they're not going to be have a high exposure to sun, but they will be exposed to sun, leaving work, going out for a cup of coffee, going to the grocery store. That's one sunscreen. Then I tell them they should have an industrial sunscreen for when they're out, they're surfing, they are, going on a hike, biking or whatever. So being very, very sun safe. And then obviously we teach them about the ills of cigarette smoking, not just for their skin, but overall health. We tell them, yes, alcohol in moderation is okay, but anything in excess is likely to take its toll. Proper nutrition. And then for when they're in their teens or early 20s, if they're interested, we get them started on what I call very light skincare. So it's mainly, for instance, like light glycolic. I have three children, and they all had a very active lifestyle growing up because they all were tennis players, and they're swimming, surfing, and so forth and so on. So from an early age, early on when they were in their teens and 20s, obviously I've taught them a lot about acne control, how to manage that. But then we get them started on good skincare habits, starting out with very light glycolic products just for exfoliation. And then as we move into the 30s, they continue that habit, again, being sun safe, eating well, exercising, getting enough rest. And then the 30s, and when we start getting to the 40s, they continue those good habits, but maybe now they're seeing some early signs of facial aging that they're bothered by. And then, I tell them that at this point, if they wanted to, they can bring some non-invasive treatments such as Botox, various soft tissue fillers to try and get some of those early signs of aging. We try and hold off on cosmetic surgery because I'm a firm believer that the body, I think has a certain capacity for plastic surgery. In other words, it's my personal belief that you can look great maybe after 2 or 2.5 facelifts. But if you see people that have had the 5 and 6 facelifts, I don't care how much volumizing you do, they just don't look good. So then I tell patients who come in, they're 45, they want a facelift. I tell them, well, facelift is going to last anywhere from, let's say, 7, 12 years, something like that. So let's pace ourselves. What you want to do is, you don't need it now. Let's buy some time. You can use some non-invasive treatments, whatever. And then as we start getting into maybe, the mid 50s, late 50s, if you want to start talking about a facelift, that's great. Because then most people, when they're probably in their 70s or 75, they're not going to want another facelift at that point. So I tell them, then that way you'll have a well thought out plan so that you don't end up with some patients who come in and they've had 4 and 5 facelifts and they're way overpulled. And to me, it's that point to rescue that patient is very difficult. So we never want to get to that point.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I completely agree with you as far as the number of surgeries is so important. And part of it, I think, too, is scar tissue. You and I know that every time you operate on somebody, there's more scar tissue that builds up. We see that when we do nose jobs. And the more surgery, the more scar tissue. And some people say, well, can't you operate to remove this scar tissue? And it's the opposite, actually. We operate, there's going to be even more scar tissue. And so definitely doing it when the time is right. I get patients that ask me the same thing. They'll be, let's say, in their late 40s and say, well, isn't it better to do it when I'm younger because the results are going to last longer? How do you respond to those patients? Somebody comes in, they're 47, they're seeing some early aging, and they don't like it. The skin's getting a little loose. Does it make sense that the younger you are, the longer those results will be? So why not do it when they're younger?
Well, it'll when you're younger, you're going to get a great result because basically the tissues are very good, but that has to be balanced against the fact that you are intervening at a very young age. And so I tell them it really comes down to pacing yourself, and I try and show them what non-invasive will do, and tie them along. And many of them are very grateful for this advice because here they came in with the idea that they're going to have plastic surgery, and they leave saying, wow, he has the ability to do plastic surgery, but he actually told me that at this stage I don't need it. That's a big message because it's kind of like, not that I equate myself to being a mechanic, but if you take your car in and you think it needs a major overhaul and the mechanic comes out and says, actually your car's in really good shape. All it needs is just a tiny little tune-up, but you don't need to change the carburetor. You don't need to change your air filter. Everything's good. Wow, that's a big message. So I tell them that, let's try and pace ourselves, and let's only do the things that are necessary because we're looking at the big picture. We're not looking at a small segment in time. I like to think that I'm kind of their caretaker for looking good for the rest of their life. So because of that, that's a big responsibility.
Yeah, and I love that because I think we have basically the same approach. That there are surgeons, and so for those people listening and watching today, if you're thinking about plastic surgery and you consult with somebody, there are those doctors where the consultation is, okay, you come in, these are the issues I have, and their consultation is, okay, these are the things that I can do for you, and this is how much it costs. And it's not so much of, okay, what's in my best interest, but it's like the answer is always yes for those doctors. And it's a shame because just like you said, sometimes you can always operate on somebody, and it makes doctors money, but is it really in the best interest all the time? And the answer is, of course, it's not. And so, I think if you're reading or if you're watching and listening, and you're thinking about seeing somebody, and you consult with them, and it just seems like they say yes to everything you say, and there's no real thought about, well, okay, is it really what's best for me? Then there's something that maybe you should consider getting a second opinion and seeing. Do you truly need all those procedures? And is it really going to do you, the best thing at this time? And one thing that I tell my patients too is we kind of look at the risk versus the benefit, and the upside versus the downside. And if you're real young and the upside is really quite small because you already look really good, the downside of those scars and the recovery and stuff, it may not really be worth it, and so that's the other thing that I try to discuss with my patients.
Yeah, I agree totally.
So you're saying basically then, for those people in their 20s and 30s, really focusing, if you're looking at a life plan for plastic surgery, focusing on non-surgical options, really preventative treatments. Dr. Ishii mentioned good skin care, sun protection. So get a sunscreen, one that you use kind of daily, and then something that's stronger, more industrial, higher SPF for when you're surfing. Not that you surf here in Michigan, but if you're on the coast. And then when you get your 30s, that's when starting to really start looking at maybe some early preventative things. You get to your 40s, and now you're starting to think about some more of the procedural things. You're starting to get some loose skin. So do you offer anything in your office for skin tightening short of a facelift?
We do, but at the present time, at least in my hands, the skin tightening devices, they're okay, but they're not great. So the patients have to be properly consulted. So if a patient comes in and says, I understand that it's not going to be equivalent to a facelift, but I want to just buy some time, tide them over, then I have nothing against, various tightening devices, things like this. But I think one of the keys with plastic surgery is balancing the patient's expectations against, what is truly achievable, right? So in other words, what you also want to avoid, on the other hand, is you don't want to spend, or you don't want to have a patient spend a lot of money doing a lot of different treatments, whether or not they'd be invasive or non-invasive. But let's say a patient spends, $5, $6, $7, $8,000 on non-invasive treatments, when maybe an invasive treatment would have been much better. Mm-hmm. So we coach them, but when they're younger, non-invasive ones work great to tide them over. And then as we start getting more into the 50s and 60s, then unless the patient doesn't want surgery, you have to point out to them that the non-invasive treatments will start falling. They start falling a little short of what the patient really wants. And so then we bring in the other modalities.
Exactly. And that's the other thing too, is you can go the opposite way, where I know of doctors, and let's say doctors who do cosmetic treatments, but they don't do surgery, and you have a person who's in their 60s and they've got a lot of loose skin. They say, oh, well, let's use a skin tightening treatment. And then a patient spends $2,000-$3,000. They have a lot of discomfort, and they go, well, geez, I didn't really see a whole lot. That's kind of the other side of it. Is there are those doctors that are doing facelifts maybe too early, but then also it's at one point, you get to that point where, just like you said, those non-surgical treatments, you're going to be spinning your wheels. You're going to be spending money. You may be undergoing discomfort and finding that it's not right for you. So that importance, once again, of seeing a board-certified plastic surgeon, a member of the Aesthetic Society, somebody who is going to not only take care of you, but it's also going to do that in an ethical fashion where, hopefully they're going to be able to tell you, okay, really what is in your best interests. And that's something I feel like you and I are definitely completely on that same page. Well, one thing we do at the end of every show is we ask the guest of one piece of advice that we would like our listeners and our viewers to take away from our talk today. Obviously, we covered a lot of different things with the importance of an ASAP's plastic surgeon and with the life plan for looking good. But what one piece of advice would you like our listeners and viewers today to leave with from Dr. Clyde Ishii, president of the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery?
Well, I would recommend that if the patient really wants to look their very best and look naturally beautiful, that try and find a board-certified plastic surgeon that you can, I call, resonate with. In other words, you trust that surgeon. You believe that they have your best interest at heart, and then use that person as a great resource, because patients can't be expected to be up to date on the latest technologies, what a technology will and will not do. But on the other hand, if you have that so-called let's say your beauty coach or your life coach, whatever you call it, and this is someone that you trust, then use that plastic surgeon as your resource, and in that manner, I think you're going to get overall the best results, as opposed to just going from one thing to another just by the different fads that are going around. You don't want to get into that situation. Use that board-certified plastic surgeon who specializes in cosmetic surgery. Use that person as a great resource and friend.
And that's one thing that with ASAPs that we're trying to do is we have a hashtag Trust ASAPs. And I think that's the number one thing is you want to make sure that you trust your plastic surgeon. And unfortunately, in today's kind of Wild West medicine climate, you can't just trust any doctor, unfortunately, when they're recommending things to you. So definitely, take a peek at the Aesthetic Society, and ideally, if you're thinking about plastic surgery, that's the type of doctor you want to go to. So Dr. Clyde Ishii, he is a board-certified plastic surgeon. He's a president of the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. He is in private practice in Honolulu, right?
That is correct.
In Honolulu, Hawaii. So if you find yourself out there, he has a great practice out there doing all sorts of cosmetic surgery, both surgery and non-surgical treatments. And if you're looking for a board-certified plastic surgeon in your area, you're thinking about cosmetic treatments, go to surgery.org. That's the website. Surgery.org is the website for the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's been my honor, Dr. Youn. I think what you're doing is a great service to all patients who are looking into possibly having plastic surgery.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Dr. Anthony Youn, America's holistic plastic surgeon, and this is the Holistic Plastic Surgery Show. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Okay. Aloha.
Do you want to look 10 years younger without having surgery? Well, my best-selling book, The Age Fix, will tell you how. I spent the past 17 years learning the secrets to turning back the clock, and have written all the best of these secrets in this book. This includes the Age Fix diet, simple changes to what you eat that can make a huge difference in your appearance. I'll share with you a simple skincare routine to keep aging and wrinkles at bay. And I'll share with you the best secrets to treat every single beauty and aging problem there is, from age spots to wrinkles, saggy skin to bad breath, saddlebags to hair loss. And almost all of these can be effectively treated without surgery. So are you ready to turn back the clock and kick Father Time's backside? If so, check out The Age Fix. Now, if you purchase it on my website, dryoun.com, you'll get over $10 off the cover price, free shipping, and you'll receive several free gifts, including a bonus chapter that you can only get by purchasing the book there. Thank you for making The Age Fix such a huge success.